The alien ship Kethmoran moved slowly through the empty space where Earth's solar system used to be. Captain Zixtheta stood on the bridge, his tall gray body bent over the control panel. His large black eyes studied the readings on the screen. 300 years had passed since the humans were gone, but debris still floated in this dead region of space. "Captain, we are detecting something unusual," said Dr. Namara, the ship's science officer. Her voice was soft and musical, like all Veltari voices. She pointed one of her long, thin fingers at her scanner. "There is a metallic object ahead. It appears to be artificial." Zixtheta walked over to look at the readings. The Veltari were tall and graceful, with skin that looked like polished stone. Their movements were slow and careful. They had evolved on a peaceful world where violence was unknown. Physical strength was something they had never needed. "Bring us closer," the captain ordered. "But maintain a safe distance. We do not know what human technology might still be active." The ship's communications officer, Linvas, looked up from her station. "Captain, the humans have been extinct for 3 centuries. What could possibly still be functioning after all this time?" Zixtheta did not answer immediately. Like all Veltari, he had heard the stories about humans. Most of his people believed the Tales were just myths created by frightened species. Stories of creatures who could lift massive weights with their bare hands, beings who could run for hours without stopping. Warriors who fought with such fury that entire armies would flee in terror, but Zixtheta had seen the records. He had read the reports from the Coalition worlds. The humans had been real, and they had been exactly as terrifying as the stories claimed. That was why the galaxy had decided they were too dangerous to live. "There," said Dr. Namara, pointing at the main viewing screen. "Do you see it?" Floating in the darkness was a white pod, about the size of a small room. It was clearly human in design, with their strange angular shapes and heavy construction. Most surprising of all, there were lights blinking on its surface. "It still has power," whispered Linvas. "After 300 years, it still has power." Security Chief Cordis stepped forward. Like all Veltari, he was thin and fragile-looking, but he carried himself with the confidence of someone who had studied warfare for years. "Captain, I recommend we destroy it immediately. Human technology is unpredictable. It could be a weapon." "No," said Dr. Namara quickly. "Look at the design. This is not a weapon. See the transparent section at the front? And the life support systems? This is a cryogenic preservation unit. There might be a human inside." The bridge fell silent. The idea of a living human was both fascinating and terrifying to the Veltari. They had spent centuries studying the extinct race, trying to understand how such primitive creatures had become so feared across the galaxy. "Scan it," ordered Zixtheta. "Full biological and technological analysis." Dr. Namara's hands moved quickly over her instruments. The scanner sent invisible beams toward the pod, reading its contents. After several minutes, she looked up with excitement in her large dark eyes. "Captain, there is definitely a life form inside. The biological readings are consistent with human physiology. Male, approximately 35 years old by human standards. The cryogenic systems are functioning perfectly. He appears to be in perfect health." Cordis stepped closer to the captain. "Sir, we should leave immediately." "If that thing wakes up, it will not wake up unless we allow it to," interrupted Dr. Namara. "The pod is designed to maintain stasis indefinitely. The human inside has no idea we are here." Zixtheta studied the pod on the screen. Inside was possibly the last human in the galaxy. The final member of a species that had once spread across dozens of worlds. A living piece of history. "Think of what we could learn," Dr. Namara continued. "We could study human biology directly. We could ask questions about their culture, their technology, their way of thinking. The scientific value would be immeasurable. The danger would also be immeasurable," said Cordis. "Captain, the Coalition destroyed the humans for a reason. They were too aggressive, too violent, too unpredictable. Even one human could be extremely dangerous." Linvas looked between the two officers. "But surely one human could not threaten an entire ship." We have advanced technology, energy weapons, security systems, and look at us compared to them. We are much larger, and we have 4 arms to their 2. Dr. Nimara nodded enthusiastically. The human appears to be quite small by our standards, perhaps 1.5 meters tall. And look at how thin his limbs are. He looks almost fragile. Through the transparent section of the pod, they could see the human's face. He had dark hair and skin that was pale from centuries in stasis. His features were smaller and more compact than Veltari faces. He looked peaceful, almost childlike. The stories about human strength must have been exaggerated, said Linvas. Look at him. He is so small and weak-looking. How could something like that threaten anyone? Zixtheta remained silent for a long time. He had read the historical records more carefully than his crew. The Coalition had not destroyed humanity because they were evil. They had destroyed them because they were afraid. But looking at the sleeping human, it was hard to understand why. Dr. Nimara, he said finally, what would be required to safely revive this human? The science officer's eyes brightened. We would need to bring the pod aboard and connect it to our medical systems. The revival process would take several hours. We could monitor his vital signs and ensure he remains stable throughout. And if he becomes violent, asked Cordis. We have containment fields, Dr. Nimara replied. Energy barriers that could hold him in place. We also have sedatives that should work on human physiology, and if necessary, we have weapons. Zixtheta looked at each of his officers. They were all brilliant scientists, but they had never encountered anything truly dangerous. The Veltari had been a peaceful species for so long that they had forgotten what real threat looked like. Very well, he decided. We will bring the pod aboard. But I want maximum security precautions. Energy barriers, armed guards, and constant monitoring. At the first sign of trouble, we sedate him immediately. Thank you, Captain, said Dr. Nimara. This could be the greatest scientific discovery in Veltari history. As the crew prepared to bring the human pod aboard, none of them truly understood what they were about to unleash. They saw a small, weak-looking creature and assumed the stories about human strength were myths. They had lived so long in peace that they could not imagine the fury that dwelt within the sleeping human dot inside the pod. Jake Morrison continued his dreamless sleep, unaware that his 300-year journey was about to end. He had been a construction worker on Earth, a man who built things with his hands and solved problems with simple tools. He had never thought of himself as particularly strong or dangerous, but he was human. And the galaxy was about to remember why that mattered. The Veltari ship moved toward the pod, its crew excited about their scientific discovery. They had no idea they were about to wake something that would change their lives forever. In their eagerness to study the last human, they had forgotten the most important lesson of galactic history. There was a reason the Coalition had been afraid of humans, and they were about to find out what that reason was. The medical bay of the Kethmoran hummed with activity as the Veltari crew prepared for the revival process. Dr. Nimara moved carefully around the human pod, checking connections and monitoring readings. The pod had been secured in the center of the room, surrounded by energy barriers that glowed with a soft blue light. All systems are ready, Captain, Dr. Nimara reported. Her 4 arms worked quickly over the control panels, adjusting settings and preparing the revival sequence. The human's vital signs are stable. Brain activity is minimal but normal for cryo sleep. We can begin the warming process whenever you give the order. Captain Zixtheta stood behind the safety barrier, watching the sleeping human through the transparent section of the pod. Jake Morrison looked so peaceful, so harmless. His face was relaxed and his breathing was so slow it was barely visible. The captain found it hard to believe this small creature could be dangerous. Security teams are in position, reported Cordis. 6 Veltari guards stood around the room, each carrying energy weapons. Their weapons were set to stun, designed to disable without causing permanent harm. If the human shows any signs of aggression, we can neutralize him immediately. Begin the process, ordered Zixtheta. Dr. Nimara pressed a series of buttons on her control panel. Inside the pod, The temperature began to rise slowly. The frost on the transparent surface started to melt, revealing more of the human's features. His skin was pale but healthy-looking. His hair was dark brown and cut short. He wore simple clothes that looked like they were made for physical work. Body temperature is rising, Dr. Namara reported. Heart rate is increasing. Brain activity is becoming more active. The revival process will take approximately 2 hours. Linvas approached the captain. Sir, I have been studying human language files. I should be able to communicate with him when he wakes up. Their primary language seems relatively simple. Good, said Zixtheta. We need to keep him calm when he first awakens. He will be confused and possibly frightened. We must make him understand that we mean no harm. Over the next 2 hours, the crew watched as Jake Morrison slowly returned to life. His breathing became deeper and more regular. His fingers began to twitch slightly. His eyes moved beneath closed lids, showing that he was beginning to dream. Remarkable, whispered Dr. Namara, studying her readings. Look at these biological measurements. His bone density is 3 times higher than I expected. His muscle mass is incredibly dense. And his cardiovascular system is far more efficient than our computer models predicted. What does that mean? Asked Linvas. It means the human body is designed for physical stress that we cannot even imagine, Dr. Namara replied. Look at his hands. See how thick and strong they appear? And his arms and legs are far more muscular than they first appeared. This is not a weak creature. Cordis stepped closer to the readings. Doctor, are you saying the stories about human strength might be true? I'm saying this human is built like a machine designed for heavy work, Dr. Namara answered. His body is constructed for power and endurance in ways that our species never evolved. Suddenly, Jake's eyes opened. He stared up at the ceiling of the medical bay for several seconds, blinking slowly. His eyes were brown and alert, taking in his surroundings with quick, intelligent movements. Then he saw the aliens standing around. What the hell? Jake said, his voice rough from centuries of disuse. The Veltari jumped back in surprise. Even through the energy barriers, Jake's voice sounded powerful and deep compared to their soft, musical speech. Linvas stepped forward, speaking slowly in English. Please remain calm. You are safe. We are scientists. We found you in space and brought you here to help you. Jake tried to sit up, but the restraints across his chest held him down. They were made of strong synthetic material, designed to hold a struggling patient safely. Jake looked at the straps with confusion. Where am I? He asked. What happened to the evacuation ship? Where are the other survivors? Linvas looked at Captain Zixtheta, who nodded for her to continue. You have been in cryo sleep for 300 years. We are the Veltari. We found your pod drifting in space. Jake's eyes widened. 300 years? That's impossible. The evacuation was only supposed to last a few months until we found a new colony world. I'm sorry, Linvas said gently. But much time has passed. The evacuation ships did not succeed. What do you mean they didn't succeed? Jake's voice became louder and more urgent. What happened to the other ships? What happened to Earth? The Veltari exchanged glances. They had not expected the human to be so emotionally intense. His reactions were much stronger than anything they had ever experienced. Earth is gone, Linvas said carefully. Your species did not survive the evacuation. You appear to be the last human in the galaxy. Jake stared at her for a long moment, then his face twisted with pain and anger. No, that's not possible. My wife Lisa was on the colony ship heading for New Terra. My daughter Emma was with her. They made it out. They had to make it out. I am sorry, Linvas repeated. But our records show that all human colonies were destroyed. There are no other survivors. Jake's hands clenched into fists. The movement was so quick and violent that several guards raised their weapons. The restraints across his chest creaked under the sudden tension. You're lying, Jake said, his voice now filled with rage. Lisa and Emma made it out. I put them on that ship myself. I stayed behind to help with the evacuation. They're alive somewhere. Dr. Nimara looked at her readings with alarm. Captain, his stress levels are extremely high. His heart rate has doubled. His muscle tension is off our measuring scale. Sedate him, ordered Cordis. No, wait, said Jake, hearing the word he recognized. I'm not going to hurt anyone. I just need to know what happened to my family, but the guards were already moving. One of them pressed a button on his weapon, preparing to fire a sedative dart. Jake saw the movement and reacted instinctively. He pulled against the restraints to move away from the weapon. The synthetic straps, designed to hold struggling patients, snapped like pieces of string. Jake sat up quickly, his powerful muscles propelling him upward faster than the Veltari could react. The entire room fell silent. The guards stared at the broken restraints in shock. Dr. Nimara looked at her instruments in disbelief. The restraints were strong enough to hold 3 Veltari, but Jake had broken them without even trying. I told you I wasn't going to hurt anyone, Jake said, looking around at the terrified aliens. I just want to know what happened to my family. He swung his legs over the side of the medical bed and stood up. The movement was smooth and controlled, showing no signs of weakness despite 3 centuries in cryosleep. Jake was not a tall man by human standards, but he was still shorter than the Veltari. However, his body was compact and powerful, built for heavy physical work. Please sit back down, Linva said nervously. We need to complete your medical examination. I feel fine, Jake replied. Better than fine, actually. How long did you say I was asleep? 300 years, Linvaz repeated. Jake ran his hands through his hair, trying to process the information. 300 years. And you're telling me everyone is dead, Earth is gone. The colonies failed. Yes, said Captain Zixtheta, speaking for the first time. The human species became extinct long ago. You're the last of your kind. Jake looked at the captain with eyes that held a mixture of grief and anger. Then why are you here? Why were you in Earth's solar system if humans have been gone for 3 centuries? The question hung in the air like a challenge. The Veltari crew exchanged nervous glances. They had not expected the human to ask such direct questions so quickly. We are scientists, Dr. Nimara said carefully. We study extinct civilizations. We were investigating the remains of your solar system for research purposes. Jake studied her face for a moment. Even in his grief and confusion, his mind was working. He had been a construction foreman on Earth, used to managing complex projects and dealing with people who did not always tell the truth. Research, he said slowly. You just happened to be researching my dead solar system at the exact moment my cryopod's power was about to fail. It was fortunate timing, Linva said quickly. Yeah, Jake replied, his voice growing cold. Real fortunate. The human looked around the room, taking in the advanced technology, the energy weapons, the fear in the alien's eyes. Something was not right about this situation, but he could not figure out what yet. I want to see the records, Jake said. I want to know exactly what happened to Earth and the colony ships. That might not be wise, said Captain Zixtheta. The information could be disturbing. My wife and daughter are dead, Jake said, his voice steady but filled with pain. Everything I ever knew is gone. I think I can handle disturbing. Dr. Nimara looked at her captain. Sir, we should continue the medical examination. The human has a name, Jake interrupted. Jake Morrison. And I'm not going anywhere until I get some answers. The Veltari crew realized they were no longer dealing with a confused, helpless patient. They were facing a man who had lost everything and wanted to know why. A man whose physical strength was already proving to be far beyond what they had expected, and they were beginning to understand that the stories about humans might not have been myths after all. Dr. Nimara convinced Captain Zixtheta to allow more physical tests on Jake Morrison. She claimed it was necessary to understand human biology, but her real motivation was scientific curiosity. The broken restraints had shown that humans were stronger than expected, and she wanted to know exactly how much stronger. We need to document everything, Dr. Nimara told the captain in private. This is the last human in the galaxy. The data we collect could be invaluable for our archives. Jake agreed to the tests, but not because he trusted the aliens. He was hoping to learn more about what had really happened to humanity. Every conversation with the Veltari felt like they were hiding something important. The testing began in the ship's gymnasium, a large room that the Veltari used for their gentle exercise routines. Their equipment was designed for beings who had never needed to develop serious physical strength. Jake looked around at the delicate machines and lightweight tools. "This is your gym?" Jake asked Linvas, who was translating for the science team. "Yes," she replied. "We use it to maintain our health and flexibility." Jake picked up what appeared to be their heaviest weight. It was a smooth, metallic object that two Veltari needed to lift together. Jake held it easily in one hand, turning it over to examine it. "How much does this weigh?" he asked. Linvas consulted her tablet. "Approximately 50 kilograms. Jake looked confused. "That's only about 100 pounds. This is your heavy weight?" "It is the heaviest weight on the ship," Dr. Namara confirmed. "It requires 2 of our strongest crew members to lift it safely." Jake set the weight down gently and looked around the room. "Do you have anything heavier? Like maybe something that's not exercise equipment?" Dr. Namara's eyes brightened with excitement. "We could move to the cargo bay. There are supply containers there that are much heavier." 20 minutes later, the entire science team stood in the cargo bay, watching Jake examine the storage containers. These were large metal boxes used to transport supplies between ships. Each one weighed several hundred kilograms when full. "These should provide a better test of your capabilities," Dr. Nimara said, her instruments ready to record everything. Jake walked over to one of the containers and checked the label. "What's in this one?" "Medical supplies," answered Linvas. "It weighs approximately 800 kilograms. Jake bent down and wrapped his arms around the container. The Veltari expected him to struggle, perhaps to ask for help or special equipment. Instead, Jake straightened up smoothly, lifting the massive container as if it weighed nothing at all. The aliens stared in complete silence. Jake held the container easily, showing no signs of strain or effort. His breathing was normal, and his muscles seemed relaxed. "Is this heavy for humans?" Jake asked, noticing their shocked expressions. "Heavy?" Dr. Namara's voice was barely a whisper. That container weighs more than 2 of our crew members combined. You are holding it like it is an empty box." Jake looked down at the container and shrugged. "I used to move steel beams twice this weight on construction sites. This is actually pretty light." He set the container down and walked over to a larger one. "What about this one?" "That one weighs 1,500 kilograms, Linvas said, her voice shaking slightly. Jake lifted it just as easily. He even carried it across the room and set it down in a different location, demonstrating that he was not just lifting it, but actually moving it with full control. "Interesting," he said. "The artificial gravity on this ship feels a little light compared to Earth. Are we at about 80% normal gravity?" Dr. Namara checked her instruments. "We are at 95% of your planet's gravity." "How did you know?" "Everything feels a little easier to lift," Jake explained. "On Earth, I could deadlift about 400 pounds on a good day. Here, I bet I could lift a lot more." The science team exchanged worried glances. If Jake was stronger in their ships, gravity, and if he was already lifting weights that should have been impossible, then the stories about human strength were not just true, they were underestimated. "Let us test your running speed," Dr. Namara suggested. Hoping to move away from the strength demonstrations, they moved to the ship's main corridor, a long straight section that the Veltari used for walking exercise. Dr. Namara set up timing equipment while Jake stretched his legs. "I haven't run in 300 years, Jake said. "I might be a little rusty." "Please run from this point to the far end of the corridor," Dr. Namara instructed. "Run at whatever speed feels comfortable." Jake started jogging at what he considered a moderate pace. To the Veltari, it looked like he was flying. Their own top speed was a slow walk compared to Jake's casual jog. The timing equipment registered speeds that should have been impossible for a biological creature. "Faster!" called Dr. Nimara. "Show us your maximum speed." Jake picked up his pace, running at about the speed he used to chase his daughter Emma around the playground. He reached the end of the corridor and jogged it back, breathing slightly harder but showing no signs of exhaustion. "How fast was that?" Jake asked. Dr. Nimara stared at her instruments. 68 kilometers per hour. "That is faster than our emergency vehicles?" "That wasn't even close to full speed," Jake said. "I was just stretching my legs." Security Chief Cordis, who had been watching from the side, stepped forward. "Captain, we need to talk." Captain Zix Theta joined Cordis in a corner of the corridor. They spoke in low voices, but Jake's enhanced hearing picked up most of their conversation. "Sir, this human is more dangerous than we thought," Cordis whispered. "He could tear through our ship's hull with his bare hands. Our weapons might not even slow him down." "He seems peaceful enough," Zix Theta replied quietly. "For now," Cordis said. "But what happens when he finds out the truth about what happened to his species?" Jake pretended not to hear, but his mind was racing. What? Truth? What were they hiding about humanity's extinction? Dr. Nimara approached Jake with another test. "We would like to measure your grip strength. Please squeeze this device as hard as you can." Jake took the instrument, which looked like a small metal bar with sensors. He squeezed it gently, not wanting to break their equipment. The device made a small cracking sound. "I think I broke it," Jake said, looking at the bent metal in his hand. Dr. Nimara took the device with shaking hands. You crushed our strongest pressure sensor." That device was designed to measure industrial equipment. "Sorry," Jake said. "I was trying to be gentle." "Gentle?" Dr. Nimara's voice was rising in pitch. "You destroyed a device that was built to withstand forces that would crush our bones." Jake was starting to understand why the aliens looked so frightened. "Look, I know I'm probably stronger than you guys, but I'm not some kind of monster. I'm just a regular human. I built houses for a living." "Regular human?" Linvaz repeated. "You are telling us that all humans were this strong?" "Pretty much," Jake replied. "I mean, I was in decent shape because construction work keeps you fit, but I wasn't anything special." "There were plenty of people stronger than me." The implications of this statement hit the Veltari crew like a physical blow. If Jake was just an average human, then the stories about human warriors must have been about beings with incredible power. "What about human soldiers?" asked Cordis, his voice tight with fear. "Soldiers?" Jake thought about it. "Well, they trained for combat instead of construction work. They were usually in better shape than me, and they knew how to fight." Dr. Nimara was taking notes frantically. "How much stronger would a human soldier be compared to you?" "Hard to say," Jake replied. "Maybe 50% stronger." "And they knew martial arts, weapons training, tactics?" "A human soldier could probably take on—" Jake paused, looking at the frightened aliens around him. "How many of you would it take to equal one human in a fight?" The silence that followed was deafening. The Veltari crew realized they were looking at a creature that could probably defeat their entire security force without breaking a sweat. And he was telling them that he was just an ordinary member of his species. "We should return to the medical bay," Dr. Nimara said quickly. "We need to analyze these results." As they walked back through the ship's corridors, Jake noticed something he had missed before. The walls were covered with symbols and writing in various alien languages. Most of it looked like scientific notation, but some of it looked like military codes. "What's all this writing?" Jake asked Linvaz. "Research notes," she replied too quickly. "Scientific observations from our travels." Jake studied the symbols more carefully. His time in construction had taught him to read technical drawings and blueprints in multiple formats. Some of these symbols looked familiar, but not from scientific contexts. "This looks like tactical information," Jake said, pointing to a section of wall. "Fleet movements, maybe? Or strategic positions?" Linvaz looked nervous. "I would not know about such things. I am just a communications officer." Jake stopped walking and looked directly at her. "What aren't you telling me about humanity's extinction?" "I do not understand your question," Linvaz replied, but her voice was shaking. You found me in Earth's solar system after 300 years, Jake said, his voice becoming harder. You have military codes on your walls? You're scared of one. An armed human. And you keep acting like you're hiding something? Captain Zixtheta stepped forward. Jake Morrison could not sleep. The Veltari had given him quarters near the medical bay, a small room with a bed designed for their tall, thin bodies. Jake lay on the uncomfortable surface, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything he had learned. Something was wrong with their story. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. The aliens claimed to be scientists studying extinct civilizations, but their ship had military equipment. They claimed humanity had simply failed to survive, but they were terrified of one unarmed human. Most importantly, they had been in Earth's solar system at exactly the right time to find his cryopod. After 300 years, the chances of that being an accident were nearly zero. Jake got up and walked to the door of his room. It opened automatically as he approached. No locks, no security measures. The Veltari either trusted him completely, or they were confident their weapons could stop him. If necessary, he decided to find out which one was true. The ship's corridors were dimly lit during what the aliens called their rest period. Jake moved quietly through the passages, using skills he had learned during his construction work. Building sites taught you how to move carefully in the dark, how to avoid making noise that might wake sleeping workers. He found the ship's computer. Terminal room after 20 minutes of searching. The door was locked, but Jake examined the mechanism carefully. It was electronic, designed to respond to authorized crew members. But the physical components were made of the same light metals that everything else on the ship seemed to use. Jake gripped the door handle and twisted slowly. The metal bent and deformed under his grip until the locking mechanism broke with a soft click. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The computer room was filled with displays showing various ship functions. Jake could not read the alien text, but he recognized some of the symbols from his earlier observations. These were definitely military systems disguised as scientific equipment. He found a terminal that seemed to contain historical records and began searching through the data. Most of it was incomprehensible, but he found files that contained images and star charts. After several minutes of searching, he found what he was looking for: records of human colonies. The files showed dozens of human settlements across different star systems. Each file contained detailed information about the colony's location, population, and defensive capabilities. Jake felt his blood grow cold as he realized what he was looking at. These were not scientific records. They were target lists. He continued searching and found communication logs between different alien species. The files were partially translated into human language, probably for study purposes. Jake read through them with growing horror and rage. The messages discussed something called the Coalition of Civilized Worlds. They talked about the human problem and the need for a final solution. They debated different methods of elimination and argued about which species would take responsibility for different human colonies. Jake found a message that made his hands shake with fury. It was a report from a Veltari commander to the Coalition. Leadership: new Terra colony eliminated successfully. No survivors detected. Human evacuation ship intercepted and destroyed before reaching safe distance. Recommend similar tactics for remaining human settlements. New Terra. That was where Lisa and Emma had been going. Jake's wife and daughter had not died in some cosmic accident or failed evacuation. They had been murdered. Hunted down and killed by these aliens who pretended to be peaceful scientists. He kept reading, finding more reports of systematic genocide. The Coalition had spent decades hunting down every human settlement, every evacuation ship, every refugee group. They had been thorough and efficient, using their advanced technology to track down humans across the galaxy. The final report was dated almost 300 years ago. It declared the human species officially extinct and recommended continued monitoring of former human space to ensure no survivors remained, but they had missed one. Jake Morrison, sleeping in his cryopod, had drifted undetected through space. For 3 centuries, while the galaxy celebrated humanity's destruction, Jake stood up from the computer terminal, his entire body shaking with rage. His wife was dead, his daughter was dead. Not from accident or failure, but from deliberate murder. These aliens had killed his family, and then pretended to rescue him from the aftermath. He heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Someone was coming to check on the computer room. Jake moved to the broken door and waited. Dr. Namara entered the room, probably making routine checks on the ship's systems. She saw Jake standing in the darkness and let out a small cry of surprise. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice nervous. "You should not be here. This area is restricted." "I bet it is," Jake replied, his voice deadly quiet. "Lots of interesting files in here. Want to tell me about New Terra?" Dr. Nimara's large eyes widened in fear. "I do not know what you mean." "My wife and daughter were on the colony ship to New Terra," Jake said, stepping closer to her. "Your people killed them. You hunted them down like animals." "No," Dr. Namara said quickly. "We are scientists. We do not engage in violence." Jake grabbed her by the front of her scientific robes and lifted her off the ground. She weighed almost nothing to him, like lifting a child. "Your species reported the successful elimination of New Terra colony. I read the files. You murdered my family." Dr. Namara struggled weakly in his grip. "Please, you do not understand. It was not our choice. The Coalition decided that humans were too dangerous. We were following orders." "Too dangerous?" Jake's voice was rising. "We were trying to evacuate. We were leaving the galaxy. We just wanted to survive." "You were spreading too quickly," Dr. Namara gasped. "Taking too many worlds, growing too strong. The Coalition was afraid you would eventually conquer everyone." Jake set her down but kept his hands on her shoulders. "So you decided to commit genocide instead of trying to talk to us." "We tried diplomatic contact," Dr. Namara said desperately. "But humans always responded with aggression. Every first contact resulted in conflict." "Because you were attacking our colonies," Jake snarled. "We were defending ourselves." Dr. Namara looked confused. "Attacking?" "No, we sent peaceful diplomatic missions, but humans always became violent. They would kill our diplomats and attack our ships." Jake stared at her for a moment, then understood. "You sent warships. You showed up at human colonies with military vessels and demanded we surrender our worlds. Then you called it diplomacy when we fought back." "We sent properly equipped diplomatic vessels," Dr. Namara protested, "with appropriate defensive capabilities." "Two humans that looked like an invasion fleet," Jake explained. "We defended our families because we thought you were trying to conquer us." The scientist looked genuinely confused. "But we explained our peaceful intentions." "Right before you started shooting," Jake said. "No wonder every first contact went bad. You people have no idea how to actually be peaceful." Dr. Namara seemed to realize she had revealed too much. She reached for the communication device on her belt, probably trying to call for security. Jake grabbed her wrist before she could activate it. "I don't think so," he said. "We're going to continue this conversation." An alarm began blaring throughout the ship. Someone had discovered the broken door or noticed that Dr. Namara was missing. Jake heard running footsteps in the corridors as security teams rushed toward the computer room. "You cannot escape," Dr. Namara said. "The ship is sealed." "Security. Teams are coming. You are trapped." Jake looked at her with cold anger. "Lady, you people spent 3 centuries thinking humans were extinct. You obviously don't understand us as well as you think." The first security team arrived at the computer room, weapons drawn. They saw Jake holding Dr. Namara and immediately aimed their energy weapons at him. "Release the doctor," commanded the team leader. "Stand down immediately or we will fire." Jake looked at the 6 armed aliens pointing weapons at him. Under normal circumstances, he would have surrendered. He was not a violent man, and he had always believed in solving problems through discussion rather than fighting. But these aliens had murdered his wife and daughter. They had committed genocide against his entire species. And now they wanted him to surrender quietly so they could probably finish the job they had started 3 centuries ago. "You know what?" Jake said, his voice completely calm. "I don't think I will." He pushed Dr. Namara gently aside and stepped toward the security team. The aliens fired their energy weapons, bright beams of concentrated power that should have dropped any biological creature instantly. The beams hit Jake and spread across his body like harmless light. He kept walking forward, apparently unaffected by weapons that could stun a dozen Veltari. "Impossible," whispered one of the guards. Jake reached the first guard and simply took the weapon out of his hands. The alien was too shocked to resist. Jake crushed the weapon like paper and dropped the pieces on the floor. "Here's what's going to happen," Jake said to the terrified security team. "You're going to take me to your captain, and he's going to tell me everything about what really happened to my species. And if we refuse?" asked the team leader, his voice shaking. Jake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I'm going to tear this ship apart piece by piece until I find the answers myself." Captain Zix Theta sat on the bridge of the Kethmoran, watching his crew panic as reports came in from all over the ship. The human had broken free and was moving through the corridors like an unstoppable force. Security teams were reporting that their weapons had no effect on him. He was tearing through bulkheads and doors as if they were made of paper. "Captain," called Communications Officer Linvez, her voice shaking with terror. "The human is demanding to speak with you. He says he will stop destroying the ship if you meet with him in the main cargo bay." "How much damage has he caused?" asked Zix Theta. "He has disabled 3 security checkpoints, destroyed 2 weapon storage areas, and torn through the main computer core," reported Cordis. "Our defensive systems are completely useless against him." Zix Theta closed his eyes and tried to think. The human had discovered the truth about the Coalition's actions. There was no point in continuing to lie. The question now was whether they could survive long enough to find a solution. "All crew members, retreat to the emergency shelters," Zix Theta ordered. "Seal all sections behind you. I will meet with the human alone." "Captain, that could be suicide," protested Cordis. "If we keep fighting him, it will definitely be suicide," Zix Theta replied. "At least this way, some of the crew might survive." Zix Theta made his way to the cargo bay, passing through sections of the ship that looked like they had been hit by explosions. Jake Morrison had not just broken through obstacles, he had demolished them completely. Metal walls were torn open like cloth. Security doors hung from their hinges in twisted pieces. Jake was waiting in the center of the cargo bay, sitting calmly on one of the supply containers he had lifted so easily during the tests. He looked up as the captain entered, and Zix Theta saw something in the human's eyes that chilled him to his core. It was not rage, it was not madness. It was cold, calculated determination. "Captain," Jake said politely, "thank you for coming. We need to have a conversation about the Coalition." Zix Theta approached slowly, keeping his hands visible and empty. "Mr. Morrison, I know you are angry about what you discovered. But you must understand that the decision to eliminate humanity was made by the entire Coalition. The Veltari were just following orders." "Following orders," Jake repeated. "That's what the doctor said too. Do you know what we call that on Earth? We call it being an accessory to murder." "Your species was expanding too rapidly," Zix Theta said desperately. "You were taking worlds that belonged to other civilizations. You were building military forces that threatened peaceful species." Jake stood up from the container, his movement smooth and controlled. "We were colonizing empty worlds. And we built defenses because people like you kept attacking our settlements." "We sent diplomatic missions," Zix Theta protested. "You sent warships to demand our surrender," Jake corrected. "Then you acted surprised when we defended ourselves." Zix Theta realized there was no point in arguing. The human had read the Coalition files. He knew the truth about what had really happened. "What do you want?" Zix Theta asked. "Information," Jake replied. "I want to know about every Coalition world. I want star charts, military positions, and population centers. I want to know who gave the orders and who carried them out." "And then what? You will kill us all?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "Captain, 3 centuries ago I was a construction worker. I built houses and schools and hospitals. I had a wife who taught kindergarten and a daughter who wanted to be a veterinarian. We were not conquerors or warriors. We just wanted to live our lives in peace. He walked closer to the captain. But you people decided we were too dangerous to exist. You hunted down my family like animals. You committed genocide against an entire species. And then you spent 300 years congratulating yourselves on making the galaxy safer. We believed we were protecting civilization, Zixtheta said weakly. You were protecting yourselves, Jake replied. You were afraid that humans might eventually become strong enough to challenge your authority. So you murdered us all before we could develop into a real threat? Jake stopped directly in front of the captain. Well, congratulations. You created exactly what you were afraid of. What do you mean? You turned a construction worker into someone who wants to tear down everything you've built, Jake said quietly. You took away my family, my people, my entire world, and now you're going to help me take yours. Zixtheta felt ice in his veins. You cannot destroy the entire coalition. There are hundreds of worlds, billions of people. I'm not going to destroy them, Jake said. I'm going to save them. Save them? Jake smiled, and for the first time since his awakening, it was not a cold expression. Captain, what's the one thing that could unite all those different species? What could bring together hundreds of worlds that normally compete and fight with each other? Zixtheta thought about it, then understood with growing horror. A common enemy, a common threat, Jake corrected. Something so dangerous that every civilized world would need to work together to stop it. You want to become the thing they feared humans would become, Zixtheta whispered. I want to become the thing they created when they murdered my family, Jake replied. And when they're all united against the terrible human threat, when they're working together instead of plotting against each other, the galaxy will finally be as peaceful as you always claimed you wanted. Zixtheta stared at the human in shock. You are planning to sacrifice yourself to force peace on the galaxy. I'm planning to give the coalition exactly what they deserve, Jake said. They want to see a dangerous human? I'll show them one. They want to believe humans are violent monsters? I'll become their worst nightmare. But you will be alone, Zixtheta pointed out. One human against the entire galaxy, Jake's smile became wider. Captain, did you really think I was the only survivor? What do you mean? Your people were thorough, but not perfect, Jake explained. Humans are really good at hiding when we need to. Some of us always survive. Jake walked over to a wall display and activated it using the ship's controls. The screen showed a star chart with dozens of marked locations. These are the positions of other cryopods, hidden colonies, and refugee ships that your coalition never found, Jake said. Some of them are probably still active. Some probably have second and third generation survivors who grew up hearing stories about what the coalition did to their families. Zixtheta looked at the star chart in growing terror. How do you know? These locations? Because I helped plan the evacuation, Jake replied. I was one of the people who decided where to hide the backup pods and emergency shelters. We always knew that if someone found the main evacuation fleet, they might come looking for survivors. Jake turned back to the captain. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me everything I asked for. Information about coalition worlds, military positions, and leadership structures. Then you're going to help me contact these survivor locations. And if I refuse, then I'll take your ship apart, piece by piece until I find what I need, Jake said calmly. But I'd rather do this the easy way. I'm not actually a violent person, Captain. I just need your cooperation. Zixtheta realized he had no choice. The human was too strong to fight and too determined to negotiate with. What happens to my crew? They go home, Jake replied. They tell the coalition that humanity is back. They warn everyone that the survivors are coming. And then they watch as the galaxy finally learns what happens when you threaten a human's family. You are condemning yourself to a life of war, Zixtheta said. You condemned me to that 3 centuries ago, Jake replied. The difference is now I'm choosing to fight it. Jake walked over to the ship's communication system and began working with the controls. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who understood complex machinery. You know, Captain, Jake said as he worked, There's something your people never understood about humans. We're not just physically strong. We're also really good at working together when we have a common goal. What goal? Asked Zix Theta. Making sure what happened to Earth never happens to anyone else, Jake replied. Your coalition taught the galaxy that genocide is an acceptable solution to problems. We're going to teach them something different. The communication system activated, sending signals across space toward the hidden human locations. After a few minutes, responses began coming back. Voices speaking in human languages, confirming that survivors were still alive at multiple locations. Jake listened to each response with growing satisfaction. His wife and daughter were gone forever, but humanity itself would survive. And the galaxy that had tried to destroy them was about to learn exactly why they had been so afraid in the first place. Welcome to the new age, Captain, Jake said, looking out at the stars. The age when humanity stops running and starts fighting back. In the depths of space, ancient cryopods began to wake up. Hidden colonies received messages that it was time to emerge from hiding. And somewhere in the galaxy, a little girl who had never seen Earth started learning about the family that had been taken from her centuries ago. The Coalition had created a monster when they destroyed humanity,